something's wrong in the country, okay? Where do people get the time? Look around you. Everybody's just walking around. Taking a photo of yourself? They call it a selfie. I can't even say the word without sweating. I can't stand the word. I call it taking a lonely. Do you know how alone you gotta be? That you can't find anybody to take a photo? That you got 838 photos of yourself in your bathroom? What are you doing? What are you doing? Nobody's working. Nobody's working. We got people in this country hanging outside movie theaters for 4 days for a movie to come out. Friday's the release date. They're there Tuesday. They got a tent. They're setting up a little picnic area, generator, sleeping bag. And they're dressed as the character in the movie. Who's doing this? My family, my friend, nobody does this. Nobody does this. Okay? I've never called my buddy, Frankie, what are you doing? Nothing, I'm dressed as Batman. I've been sleeping in a tent. I got the cape on eBay for 18 grand. I live in Los Angeles, I see it on a day-to-day. Celebrity goes on trial downtown at a courtroom. You got people outside the courtroom marching around with signs. Right? Justice for Lindsay! Justice for Lindsay! No job? You got nowhere to be on a Monday at 8:30 in the morning? I never made a sign. Have you? I never wrote on a cardboard box my feelings. Stapled it to a stick, drove the stick somewhere. And marched around in a circle for 12 hours. Justice for Lindsay! Some of you are laughing at this, some of you are not. Listen, if you're laughing, you're on board. If you're not, you're the fucking problem. I'm sorry. Okay? I'm looking at some of you. You're like, I don't know why this is funny. I dress up as Batman, and I have an igloo cooler. I don't know what's so funny about this.
All right, so I'm Sonny Macon. That's Peter Daiga. You were just listening to Sebastian Maniscalco, who is an absolutely hilarious comedian. Before we get into all of that, this is The Obvious Podcast, episode number 60. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Peter, what do you think of that?
Well, hilarious.
Hilarious, right?
Yeah.
So
Hilarious.
you and I have talked about this. We often have wondered, who are all these people that are protesting all the time? Do they not have jobs? Do you have no place to be at 8:30 on a Monday morning, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a very special...
A lot of the protests today, which also is another question in my mind, well, why are they always happening at night? You know,
Right.
Why are these ICE facilities and Antifa?
Oh, yeah.
Why is it always nighttime
That's a great
as
question.
opposed to during the day? So I guess there's critique on both sides. You know, during the day, it's like, do you not have a job to be at? You know, but at night, it's like, what?
Do you not have a family to go to?
Right. Do you not have a family to go to? Or why night when it's dark? You know, I
Right.
mean, as opposed to, I don't know.
Well, these are some great questions, but you know who can answer those questions? We have a very special guest today.
We do, which is pretty cool.
Which is very cool.
We don't always have guests on the show, but periodically we have, and we've got actually a national figure that's been in the news recently.
Yeah, I've seen him on Fox News. I've seen him on CNN.
Yep.
His name is Adam Swart, and he runs a company called
Crowds in Demand.
Crowds on Demand.
Crowds on Demand, excuse me.
Crowds on Demand. So We're very excited to have him here, and we're going to ask him some questions and hopefully give you an insight into something interesting that's happening. Welcome to the show, Adam. We're very happy you're here. It's great to meet you. I love the kitchen you're sitting behind. It's obviously beautifully built. Kind of inspires me to redo my kitchen, which needs some help right now, but that's a different story. So wanted to just start with the basics. Like, tell us about yourself. You know, as you know, Peter and I, this ABC is a commercial construction trade association. We're the largest in Florida. But we don't talk about just construction and trade. We do, you know, because we're very active politically. We have a lot of different guests and different subject matters on the podcast.
And the organization, too, by the way, Adam, is really founded on any organization, right, is about its members and has to obviously serve its members' needs. But this organization was also founded on a philosophy called the Merit Shop. So our members and the people who join in the organization is very committed to meritocracy. Right. Interestingly enough, and construction is a very an industry that's very competitive, obviously, and based on merit a lot more than others, perhaps. So, but I think a lot of people would be shocked to find out that there's such a thing as crowds on demand. And so talk a little bit of, as an intro, let's get into it. You know what? Is it true that there's actually paid crowds or crowds on demand, or that people can generate something like that? So.
Gentlemen, I would love to say that I invented this concept when I started Crowds on Demand 13 years ago. But the idea of incentivized activism, I think I've been trying to paint my own term on this. It's called incentivized activism. It's not called paid crowds, because paid crowd sounds very negative. It sounds like no one really cares about the subject. What it is incentivized activism. So you guys in the construction business, I'm sure you've dealt with labor unions, right?
Absolutely.
Labor unions have rallies, protests all the time.
Great point, Adam. Yeah, actually, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that's kind of our right. I think that'll be the most interesting to folks. Yeah. We've been dealing with this. I didn't even think about this before doing this podcast. We've been dealing this for decades in our industry. You're exactly right. We have video. We just celebrated our 75th anniversary, and some of the videos we put up, celebrating, and were our members getting together for our conventions, where a lot of these union activists, and even today, quite frankly, in areas of the country where they're still stronger, they're not so much in Florida where we are. They're only about 3% of the construction workforce here, but there are other places, obviously, where they're stronger, and we talk all the time about how. If you engage in any of the people there at that protest, they will tell you they're being paid whatever it is. Actually, usually it's sub minimum.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes, and either it's people that they hire off the street who don't even care about the issue, which is completely separate from Crowds on Demand's business model, where we hire people who are engaged and actually passionate about the issue, and we pay them to turn out. So number one, when unions do it, they're either in one of two categories. One is that, right? In many cases, people who are not even legal residents of the United States. And then the second category, which of course is ironic because their whole thing is about giving opportunities to their members. The second one is their members who are actually also being unpaid, but nonetheless expected to turn out for these events. So I was just recently talking to a firefighter who reached out, who said, Adam, you're 100% right when you make these claims, because one of the things I often say is that labor unions will incentivize people to go to rallies for their candidates or protests against people they don't like. And if you go to their events, you're going to find yourself getting really good shifts. And if you don't go to their events, you're going to find yourself with a graveyard shift or a bad role, because in many of these kind of union companies, the union
gets what you mean by incentivized
activism. Yeah, so it's incentivized. So if you go through, okay, so there's labor unions, right? So that's a very clear case where the union tells you to go, and if you don't go, there's a pretty big incentive for you to go, right? Sure. Same thing with the social media age, right? You have Instagram influencers. So a great example, I know you guys are more on the conservative side, so you'll particularly like this, is the Real Housewives of Orange County protested for Black Lives Matter in the summer of 2020, right? Many of the Real Housewives of Orange County, right? Do you think they knew anything about institutionalized racism, right? Do you think they knew anything about that systemic injustice, right? They don't know that. They just know this thing is popular and I've got to get my photo there so that my followers will think I'm down with the cause, right? So, and and not racist, right? Because that person probably lives in a 99% white community. And part of why you go to virtue signal is so that people don't focus on you and what you did, right? So I guess the point is that that's just yet another example. Now, you ever see these press conferences in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of people in the background? Do you know many of those people, if not all, are Capitol Hill staff members, right? Sure. So there are 15,000 Capitol Hill staff members, both Republicans and Democrats, right? So let's just say some senator is having a press conference on either party, right? The staff have to come, right? So they're out there. In some cases, they're told to wear plain clothes and not wear like the usual suit and tie that they wear to work, right? So, and believe me, you wouldn't, again, they're not required to as part of their job, but believe me, I wouldn't want to be the person saying I'm not going to go to the protest that the senator tells me to go to, right? So what I'm saying is that while I am sort of a little bit of a pioneer in the space of compensating activists directly, we are not the first people to invent the idea that the people who are showing up at protests are not necessarily there 100% because they support the cause. Now, I think if you're a Republican political staffer, you probably do support Republican initiatives, or Democratic political staffers, you probably do. But ultimately, the reason why you're there is because you're being asked to be there, right?
Sure.
So same thing with the union. Maybe you do support the union's preferred candidate, but in many cases, the union management tends to veer more toward the left, whereas the union membership is increasingly veering toward the right. So the AFL-CIO doesn't necessarily represent the ordinary blue-collar member whose views may be more conservative.
Right. But to your point, if they tell the rank and file to be there, they know there's going to be consequences if they don't. So,
that's entirely accurate.
Incentivized activism or disincentivized activism, or I don't know, whatever.
So my point is actually to be humble here and say, hey, I didn't create this field, but basically what we did was make it very clear, because we felt that there's a lot of kind of blurred lines in that field. So what we do is a very simple business model. We essentially compensate active people who are passionate about an issue to turn out in favor of that issue, right? And so customers pay us to turn people out. So here's kind of an example, right? Let's just say you're very wealthy homeowners and there's some sort of power plant being built near your community, right? Well, okay, you might not want that near your community. So you
don't mind the electricity that's running your blender.
Right. Sure, but you may want you may bring us in and say, look, we want to block this power plant. What can you do? So my initial thought would be, let's get environmentalists on board, right? Because no one's going to be particularly sympathetic about rich people who don't want to look at an eyesore, right? So what I would say is, okay, well, let's find environmentalists who may otherwise have their own reasons to protest.
So you perfected a system where you're able to identify those people, and they're already maybe aligned, philosophically, but you given them a little extra incentive. Now you can actually get paid to do something for a cause you love, or make a little money.
We also guarantee turnout, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I did advertising, I did radio, I did social media, I did Facebook, I did all these things, and no one turns out. Because what we do is we make it clear. If we say 100, it's going to be 100 because people are being compensated. So you have a lot more reliability in both the number of people who are going to turn out, but also the quality of the people that you're going to get.
So it sounds like, and I've got a couple questions. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, it sounds like, for one, getting momentum, it's like this snowball that rolling down the hill that gets bigger and bigger, right? It sounds like to succeed in this today, any of these political causes or whatnot, you really got to, if you can get that initial momentum, which this sounds like helps to build, this is very important to the way things are debated and talked about in the public sphere today. It just seems to me like it's like, without that momentum, or somebody thinking that, wow, there's a genuine, uprising or concern about this particular issue, and that's kind of what this is all about, managing or trying to create. And
that's exactly correct. Yeah,
Do you find that one particular side of the political spectrum is more open to? Well, first off, in your business, do you limit yourself to left of center causes, or do you do
no,
both?
absolutely not.
Okay.
We've probably worked with people on all sides of the spectrum. We tend not to work with radical, ultra
Okay.
radical folks for obvious reasons, but and that's defined by me, so I understand that definition is
Yeah.
subjective.
I mean, by
But
ultra radical, maybe you mean violent,
yeah,
for
well,
example, in
certainly
today's
don't engage
conversation.
well,
So,
well, we don't want to engage either with people who are perpetrating violence because obviously we're a lawful company. But number two, I don't want to work with people who feel that violence is a reasonable solution because
good to know.
I believe when we live in a country that gives us constitutionally the right of free expression, there's no excuse for violence. But to answer your
Amen.
broader question, the idea of compensating demonstrators, whether it's for a company, because in many cases we do it for like a product launch, companies protesting entrenched competitors. It's a natural oppositional strategy, right? So in, let's just say, a left-wing state like California, we work a lot more with conservative causes, right? Because that's the opposition to the one-party dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Democrats. Now, on a federal level, you could imagine at this exact time in 2025, we get a lot more requests from more liberal causes. So I think it's healthy because I think opposition, peaceful, respectful opposition, is actually a very important part of a democracy. When you're a leader, you should be questioned and you should be able to illustrate why your policies are right and why the protesters are incorrect.
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of conversation about, at least I think for a number of decades, that I think people on the right have had more of an opportunity to do that. They've had to defend their ideas. I don't know if you're familiar with this kind of, I'm sure you probably are. So, which I think is, I mean, my whole life pretty much I was, raised in reading and whatnot. You had to you were on the outs, and you really had to be able to defend your position and your thinking and whatnot. So, but I'm curious, and I don't mean this glibly, but I guess kind of in a way I do. I mean, do you have to pay right of center people more to do this than you do left of center people, or is it pretty much you can get people in equal quantities for pretty much the same amount? So
I think there are a lot more right of center. Well, you might not be surprised that there are a lot more right of center people out there than you would realize in this country.
I'm
and
not
right
surprised by that. I think we're the silent majority, to quote somebody else.
I think there's a lot of people who basically are what I call common sense people. So I don't know whether you want to call them right of center or center, but people who want police that responds to crime, right?
Right.
People
Want to enforce the law.
Right, who would want like basic law enforcement, who want district attorneys who prosecute crime, right? Like that, like law and order, right? The police,
No, I get your point, but unfortunately, I would think that's is right of center. Common sense is right of center these days. I don't know why or how we got here, but
well, so I would say that the general things that we tend to pay more for is not for ideology. I mean, sure, if you want right of center people, but like even in a place like New York City, right, which you think of as very, very left, right?
Certainly looks
there
that
are
way.
a lot of right of center. A lot of the very, very left places have a silent majority of people who are common sense. Seattle, Portland, who may have very liberal values, but have seen the folly of liberal policies. So the idea that, and just like there are people in Mississippi or Alabama who have seen the folly of right-wing policies, right? So when you allow I'm against one party rule in any form because I think it's bad. I think one of the reasons why Florida is such a great state, actually, is that historically, until very recently, you haven't had one party rule. The Republican candidate, the Democratic candidate, you can't take votes for granted in a state like Florida. So the fact that it's been a swing state has helped essentially make politicians more accountable to the people than they are in one party states like Mississippi, Alabama, or California.
Sure. So, Adam, how do people find you? How do people that need this type of service or want this type of service, how do they even, do they know? Is this widely known in those circles? It's just not maybe in the general public that this service is out there? I mean, I don't know.
I think it's fairly known. I mean, I can't speak to what the brand recognition is like broader in the country. I mean, certainly, as you can imagine, we have been around for 13 years, and been covered in the media a lot, including sometimes unfavorably, but that probably still, that might help us in some way in that regard. So I think a lot of people are aware of what we do, and when they're looking for the sort of unique type of services we provide, they generally quickly find that we're the best in the industry.
So I'm super curious to find out your history. Can I?
Sure.
Where did you grow up? How'd you get into this business? What inspired you? What triggered the idea in your mind that this is something you'd want to do? So and what were you doing before you started this company?
I was a college student, so I'll start with that part.
Okay.
So I started this business in college 13 years ago. I try to age gracefully. So I started this 2012, 13 years ago in college. Before that, I mean, I worked odd kind of college type jobs, but I also worked on a lot of political campaigns, mostly on the Democratic side. So I saw a few things. So number one, obviously, as I've talked about earlier, I don't associate myself with the Democratic Party or Republican Party at this point. I'm very cause focused. But that a lot, when I was working for the Democratic Party, a lot of the people who ran those campaigns came of age, were my age, instead of being in the early 2010s and in the 1960s, where there was this era of huge political engagement, right? So you could put flyers on the quad and 5,000 students would show up. And the early 2010s was a very different era on college campuses without that, right? So the challenge is that in that era, it was they're used to being able to get that support, right? And we would often struggle to kind of get even a few hundred people out there, which was, by the way, a big number. I mean, like, as I always say, imagine the greatest speeches of all time being delivered to 2 people, right? Like Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream. If 5 people were in the audience, it wouldn't have had the same resonance, right? So the fact is that we saw this opportunity, and when we were able to, and the bigger opportunity actually was protest, right? Because, okay, let's just say someone else was having a rally, the opposition candidate with 1,000 people, you could have 10 people outside, 1%, and in many cases get equal time in the media if you played your cards right. So that was kind of a very effective strategy. So I saw that. So
well, let me ask you this. What problem, when you were in college, when the idea triggered in your head, like what were you trying to solve?
I was trying to solve the problem that creating the context for these events was hard, right? So whether it's this was also an era of a lot of startup companies, right, being born. There were a lot of product launches. No one was there. Startups would die because no one's heard of them, right? This was an era of getting noticed was really hard. I mean, it still is. But that was what inspired me of saying, hey, how many great candidates, causes, whatever, are not even noticed? And then also, you'll find this funny, being in LA where there are a lot of out of work actors. So I was like, what if I put these out of work actors to work as attending all of these events, right? So these candidates, these causes, these companies, they need people in the background, right? They need that context. The actors could play the role of the protester. They could play the role of the rally goer. They could play the role of the tech person at a product launch. Now, we've sort of morphed our business model a little bit where we don't stack, like at the time we started the business, we would stack events with actors who didn't really give a crap about what they were protesting. Now we do things differently because we got bad publicity for that. And I want to be part of making this country a better place. I don't want to necessarily be part of the broader manipulation economy, right? So I like to be a catalyst, not a manipulator. So a catalyst means it's like an ad. If you buy a Super Bowl ad and a bunch of people buy your product because you were at the Super Bowl, obviously the fact that you were able to spend the $5 or $10 million to buy that Super Bowl ad was necessary for you to get those people to buy your product. But ultimately, they bought your product. So the way that I look at it is what we do in protesting and rallying and creating our advocacy campaigns, it's very similar to buying a Super Bowl ad. It's a catalyst. If it's the cause is good, it's going to grow like the Tea Party did. The Tea Party was created by the Koch brothers and other wealthy conservative billionaires, right? And funded with huge amounts of money. The thing just started with like a few people with the silly, Revolutionary War hats and garb, and grew because conservative media covered it. They had good PR people, obviously paid, right? And then it grew because it resonated with people.
So, Adam, we're going to pause for a little bit because we want to keep to our typical 20-minute format. So, enjoying the conversation. I hope all our listeners are. But
yeah, it's fascinating.
Stay tuned next week. We're going to do a part two of this interview. So,
all right.
We appreciate you all listening and honoring us with your time, and look forward to sharing that second part of this episode next Friday.
And find us on TikTok.
And everywhere else.
Where podcasts.
Our show notes. So, all right.
Take care, guys.
Okay.